Criticism last night from Israel after Britain sanctioned two of its government ministers and accused them of inciting violence against Palestinians. You'll hear a little of what David Lammy, the British Foreign Secretary, had to say, but let me give you some background on these two men. Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, if I'm saying that correctly. They will now be subjected to a travel ban and asset freeze. They belong to right-wing parties which help shore up Benjamin Netanyahu's fragile coalition government in Israel, and they have been criticised for some time over their hardline stance. From Mr Lammy in just a moment. Mr Smotrich has campaigned against allowing any aid into Gaza, also supported the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. That is considered illegal under international law. So Mr Smotrich learnt of the sanction while inaugurating a new West Bank settlement, many would say illegally, and he said, "We are determined to continue building." So that's one of them, Mr Smotrich. To Mr Ben-Gvir, he's called for Gazans to be resettled, demanded the replacement of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is considered of enormous religious importance by Muslims. He said that should be taken away, pulled down effectively, and replaced with a synagogue in Jerusalem. Earlier this year, he said there's no need to take aid to Gaza. They had enough. Resuming deliveries was a serious and grave mistake. So we get an idea of these people. Well, speaking after the sanctions were put in place, Foreign Secretary David Lammy said,
"Today, I'm talking about sanctions, I'm talking about asset freezes, I'm talking about travel bans of these two particular ministers, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who have been inciting violence against Palestinian people. When the UK says we are against something, we absolutely expect the government to condemn it and for it to stop. It hasn't stopped, and that's why we're acting with Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway today."
It's interesting the Foreign Secretary cites countries such as Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway, because as for the United States, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has condemned, putting on social media, "These sanctions do not advance US-led efforts to achieve a ceasefire, bring all hostages home and end the war. The United States urges the reversal of the sanctions." Well, speaking to my LBC colleague Ian Dale last night, Fleur Hassan Nahum, Israel's Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation, said,
"The things that they're citing, incitement of racial hatred, in every single political system, especially a democracy like Israel or the UK, there's always some unsavory characters in politics. They say sometimes some provocative statements, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Like I said, I'm not here to defend what they've said. I'm here to say that sanctioning people who have more extreme views, like you have in the UK, are we sanctioning them? No, we're not. So we all have unsavory characters that we have to deal with in a democracy. But friends don't sanction other governments.
Well, let's get some expert comment to prompt our conversation. First to Brigadier John Deverell, who's former Director of Diplomacy at the Ministry of Defence and former senior British officer in the Palestinian territories. Do you agree with the actions by the Foreign Secretary yesterday, Brigadier? Good morning.
Good morning. Very good morning, Nick. 100%, absolutely. And as Foreign Secretary Lammy has said, this has been a long time coming.
How will it move us closer to peace?
Well, the threshold for sanctioning people needs to be the same, whether we're talking about Israeli hardliners, Hamas, or anyone else. And we need to show by doing this that these actions which have fomented violence are not acceptable.
Yes, I mean, I'm just exploring the point that Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, makes, and I'm putting it rather colloquially. He said it's not getting us anywhere closer to peace. He's right, isn't he, Brigadier?
It's an opinion, I think, Nick, quite frankly. He's got nothing substantive to back that up. And unless we show very clearly that these actions are not acceptable, then the war will drag on for longer and longer.
What do you hope, and indeed what do you imagine Norway, Canada, Australia, what do they hope comes out of this, Brigadier?
That such behaviour, such words are not acceptable. I would go further, Nick. In my view, and the views of many others, other people should be sanctioned also in the chain of command militarily. War crimes. Prime Minister Olmert, a former Israeli Prime Minister himself, has talked about war crimes having been committed, and we should be doing everything possible in order to make it clear that this sort of behaviour in wartime or in peacetime is not acceptable. Otherwise, this will drag on and on, Nick.
You are a military man, sir. These are just words. Should more direct action be being taken, Brigadier?
Well, there are substantive links between ourselves, Nick, the British Ministry of Defence and the Israeli Ministry of Defence. Those should be stopped. There are further things which should be stopped in terms of export of arms, such as F-35 parts. There is certainly much more that should be done.
Grateful for your time as ever. Thank you, Brigadier John Deverell. You were former Director of Diplomacy at the Ministry of Defence, and you were senior British officer in the Palestinian territories. Well, the Brigadier saying go further up or down the chain of command. Let's put that to Yaakov Katz, who's former editor of the Jerusalem Post, senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, and wrote, While Israel Slept, How Hamas Surprised the Most Powerful Military in the Middle East. And we have spoken with Mr Katz in the past. What do you imagine the reaction will be back in Israel? Do you think that this will in any way, shape or form concern the Prime Minister? Good morning to you, Yaakov.
It concerns the Prime Minister because it does show, Nick, this, I would say, trend that we're seeing of just further diplomatic isolation and friends of Israel like the UK, Canada, turning against Israel at a time that Israel is still fighting a war, at a time that Israel is still trying to get back its hostages, to sanction two ministers who were democratically elected in a country that is a friendly country of yours, an ally. Let's put it very simply. Allies do not sanction allies.
Right. But the actions... What can you tell us about the two men?
Bezalel, Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir both ran together on a joint party list in the last election in November of 2022. They joined Netanyahu's coalition in 2023. They are the most hard line within the Israeli government. They are very right-wing. They make comments that, yes, sometimes and often most Israelis do not agree with. I would compare them almost to, let's say, Nick Farage in the UK. You know, maybe not the same. Nigel Farage, sorry.
Yep.
But on the very right-wing side of the political spectrum, yes, they're you know, if you have anti-immigration in the UK, there you have anti-Palestinian. If you have issues of religion state here when it comes to cracking down, let's say, on Muslims, so there you have issues when it comes to cracking down on Palestinian freedom of movement. There are always going to be those kind of extremists within a government, but this is a democracy, and we are supposed to be allies. This is not what's done against an ally at a time of war.
You say that, and that's a very powerful line you take, Yaakov, but it's not as if the United Kingdom is acting alone. As I'm sure you're aware, Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway all agreeing with those sanctions. So they're not sole allies, there are a number of allies. What does that tell us, perhaps?
And I think that's what's truly concerning here is the fact that we're seeing, I don't want to call it a tsunami, but it's definitely a wave of friends who were supposed to be standing, you would have thought would stand with Israel in its hour of need, where it still is fighting a war to eliminate a terrorist entity that invaded its country back on October 7th and massacred and abducted so many people. This is a real challenge that if we're losing our friends in this way, it does need to give us pause. And I would expect the Prime Minister in Israel to think about how can we stop this from happening.
And lastly, when Mr Ben-Gvir says that they'd have enough aid in Gaza and they should resume deliveries was a big mistake, that is nothing but inflammatory, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know what, Nick? Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
If after 9/11, when bin Laden was holed up in the Tora Bora Mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and this was after a horrific massacre in the United States, and America was bombing those mountain complexes where they thought caves, where they thought bin Laden was. If someone had said, stop George W. Bush, give aid to bin Laden, to Al-Qaeda, what would anyone in the world have said? They would have said, that's absurd. That's insane. So I understand, of course, there are Palestinian civilians, and we have to give them aid. But let's also remember, saying something like that is not beyond the pale. It is a legitimate argument within a war that is being fought and that was forced upon a country, again, an ally of the United Kingdom.
Thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Have yourself a good day. Thank you, Yaakov Katz, former editor of the Jerusalem Post, senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Britain has taken those actions, not alone, but allies don't sanction allies, as Mr Katz just said. Where are you on that?